Last week, I was talking about a couple of things, and one of the comments that came up was the impact that fear has on burnout. And I had to sit with it for a little bit because I was wondering how I was going to approach it, right? Because fear is actually such a big topic. Um, it affects us all, I think. I think with me, there's certain points where I have not been conscious that I'm acting from a place of fear as opposed to a fear of abundance. And I think fear can be one of these things where it convinces us that it doesn't exist. It can cloak itself as something else. So, and the risk is that sometimes we can end up acting as something that seems like we're doing it in abundance. We seem like it's doing it for these great reasons, but actually the deep reason is that it's from some kind of fear. Like, so for an example, I can be a really good person, right? Good. I might debate that another day, right? But I can be a really good person, do all the deeds of someone who I perceive to be good, but it's actually running from a fear that if I don't, people won't stay around. Does that make sense? So on this surface, it can look really good. People see these acts of grandeur, and I'm giving, and I'm, spending time with people who are in need, and I'm always there, and I'm reliable, and all this kind of thing. But it's really coming from a place where I'm scared that if I don't, I could be abandoned. And that can be like a deep wound that I might be trying to overcompensate for. So fear has a way of showing up in our lives in a way that we may not understand fully at first, but sometimes it has this way of uncovering something about our psyche, about our consciousness that we really do have to pay attention to. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it is because when it came up in the conversation last week, it was in the context of they said, "Oh, can we talk about the six basic fears and how they affect burnout?" And I really sat with that and thought that's a really good point, because if you're not familiar, there's a really popular book, obviously, by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich, and in it there are a lot of really good principles that he talks about. One of them is about the six basic fears. Okay, so the six basic fears are poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love or somebody, grief, basically, fear of age, and then the fear of death. And what I wanted to do this week was take each one individually. Part of me was like, could I just talk about fear in general? And I think I could. Maybe I'll finish off the week with a seventh day looking at the overall fear in general and how we can, combat it generally. But I think looking at it one by one is a really good place to start. So today I'm looking at the fear of poverty and how that it affects burnout, because I think some of us may be experiencing it in a way that we may not realize. And at the very high level, the fear of poverty can stem from a scarcity mindset. We've covered, I'm sure you'd be familiar with this, the idea of lack, right? But this can come from past experiences, financial struggles of the family or our communities, for example, or at least a perceived financial struggle. And as children, we pick up a lot on this, like little things like if you find your parents saying things like, "Oh, do money grow on trees?" and I'm not made of money, and the idea of hand to mouth and trying to make ends meet, and all these terms we pick up on as we're growing up can make us very hyper aware as children that money is a scarce commodity, right? And so we have to protect it, we have to be careful with how we use it, all these kind of things. And that can grow up with us in and manifest in different ways as we get older, right? Or societal pressures to achieve material wealth as well. We live in a what I would call a very capitalist society. We are urged to continue to grow and continue to reach for striving for another level of everything. Like if you get a new job, if you get a new house, if you get a new, all that kind of stuff, all the you have financial inflation on a psychological level. Like if I if I reach a new tax bracket, then my lifestyle needs to reach a new tax bracket. And then you end up still finding yourself going hand to mouth, because now your expenditures are still meeting how much your income is, right? So one of the things, before I go into what we can do about it and how it affects burnout, just to set the scene with regards to this poverty mindset, this isn't necessarily thinking about fear of poverty isn't the fear of people who are poor, but it's the fear of becoming poor or losing what you have, right? In that sense, or not being able to have control over what you have. They say that there's two ways to wealth: it's making it and keeping it, right? So it's like that idea of, if I feel like I don't have control over what's coming in and coming out, I may lose it all, right? I did a workshop during the pandemic. I was holding space for people, and I brought on someone called Dr. Decker. She's a financial specialist, and it was a phenomenal workshop that I often go back to. And there were two things that came to mind during that workshop that really helped me. So it might help you. The first one is your financial personality, right? So there, according to Investopedia, there's 5 main financial personalities. Number one is the big spenders. They're the ones who are comfortable spending money. They don't fear debt, and they often take risks when they're investing, right? Number two is the financial savers. So they're the ones who, they have no debt and maybe quite frugal, but they're conservative. They don't take risk with investments, and they tend to hoard. They'll build as much saving as possible for a rainy day, right? Then you got the shoppers. The shoppers are the ones who have an emotional satisfaction from spending money, right? They can't resist spending, even if it's to buy things they don't need. They're the ones where they'll buy something that's on sale, feeling like they've saved money, as opposed to thinking that they've spent money that they hadn't intended to spend when they first left the house. Debtors are the ones who they spend without thinking about money. They don't track it. They don't look where it comes and goes, and they find themselves in a lot of debt. And they generally spend more than they earn. And then there's the investors, the ones who are, regardless of where they are financially, they are looking to seek to get to a day where their passive income exceeds their outgoings, all right, to be able to cover all their bills. So those are the 5 main money personalities. And what you'll find is that if you have representation of that within your household, it's very likely that you might become that. So you might become the opposite of what you experienced as you grew up. Either you see this and you become it by taking on the habits of your parents and your family structure, or you see where it leads and you say, I'm not going to become that. So you develop something which is the complete opposite of your upbringing. And then there's 4 main states of financial your situation. There's financial exclusion, which means that you pretty much you don't have a bank, you're homeless, you can't get on the financial ladder at all. There's financial instability, which means that you're making income, but your income is your outgoings are exceeding your incoming. So you're unstable, right? You have financial stability, which means that your income is generally exceeding your outgoings, and you have a little bit in the savings account. But if anything major was to happen, if there was a death in a family, if you have a wedding to go to, or to have yourself, it would knock you off kilter, right? And then there's financial freedom, which is where your income has greatly exceeded your outgoings. You've got enough savings to last you good 3, 6, 9, 12 months or so. You are at a stage where you have investments and you don't necessarily need to work, right? That's where financial freedom is. And it's good to have an idea of those two, your money personality and your financial situation. So together you can get an idea, because when it comes to fear of poverty, the thing about fear is it's a feeling, it's an emotion. It's not necessarily grounded in fact. It's not necessarily grounded in the objective. You could have loads of savings and still have a fear of poverty, and that fear can still drive you towards the stress that builds up, that when unmanaged can lead towards burnout, right? So just because you have savings doesn't mean you're necessarily free from this fear of poverty. One of the things that I wanted to mention here is that It can lead to constant worry of financial security. So what can sometimes happen, if I was to link it to the Dunning-Kruger effect that I mentioned, I think in the last live, right? The Dunning-Kruger effect is the idea that people with high ability, low ability, sorry, overestimate their ability, and those with high ability underestimate their ability. And it's the idea of, like, at the beginning, you know a little bit, so you think you're really overconfident, right? And then you know a little bit more and you realize you don't know anything. And then your confidence plummets. And then afterwards, it slowly grows. It can be the same with your finances. When you have a little bit of success, a little bit of money, you feel overconfident and it can grow and you can feel great. But then there's this dip that happens when you actually start to take control and you realize how much time it will be, the patience of building wealth and building it through financially unstable times. You know, we've gone through pandemic, we've gone through financial crashes. Those of you who are, like, you know, in the boomer age or like Gen X and stuff like that have seen the ebb and flow of the global financial system. And you know, sometimes it's not just about your personal finances that will keep you. What's happening externally can rock the boat as well. So then it can, even though you're financially safe, as it were, you could still have that point where you're like, okay, nothing is secure, right? And that can build stress as well. Paying, they say knowledge is power, but knowledge is also fear, right? Sometimes ignorance is bliss, but the fear of poverty can manifest in chronic stress, anxiety about job security, and obsession with financial success. So that idea that I have to make money, I have to make money, can also bring stress that can lead you towards burnout, because then that becomes your number one priority and everything else falls to the wayside, right? You don't have your things that are going to keep you stable anymore. You don't have the things that are going to keep you joyful. You don't have that release. Everything is under this stress of, I need to make more and I can't afford to lose anything. And then what happens is, if there is a moment where there is any kind of like rock, it can throw you through a panic, and that can definitely lead you towards burnout. But that constant pressure to earn more, save more, and achieve a certain standard of living can result in workaholism, burnout, and physical symptoms like insomnia, fatigue, and even digestive issues. We've talked about how the emotional side of burnout can affect our physical side of burnout as well. Those things are often inherently linked. So if you go to the doctor, thing they'll ask you, if they're trying to heal, is they'll ask you, are you under stress? A lot of the time, that will indicate what influence is happening within the body. If you're coming out with rashes, if you have backaches and headaches, all these kind of things, if you're gaining or losing weight, all those things could be tied into stress, and all of that stress can be also part of where you are financially and where that fear is coming from. What you're feeling, do you feel comfortable? Do you feel secure? And there's 6 things that I've wanted to share with you about that can help you to help recover from this fear of poverty that can lead you towards burnout. Number 1 is practicing gratitude and mindfulness to shift the focus from lack to abundance. Ultimately, the idea that there isn't enough, a big topic. I think I maybe need to do that by itself, because right now the idea of lack of finances, you can think to yourself, okay, there isn't enough, right? There's not enough to go around globally. But then it's also linked to your inherent feeling of, if I am enough. Because if you feel like you're enough, you will believe that there is going to be enough coming to you, right? You'll be able to find or make enough. But if you feel like there's a lack, I would encourage you to reflect on whether there is a lack within as well. Yeah. So practice gratitude and mindfulness for what you have. Shift the focus from what you don't have to what you do have, right? Like shifting it from lack to abundance. That's number 1. And that can take some time. It may have taken you 30 years to get to the point where you are, where you burn out, right? So shifting that may not happen overnight. You might need help. You might need anything for 3, 6, 9, 12 months, maybe even a few years before you get to the stage where you're completely free from this thing. Number 2 is more of a practical sense, is creating a realistic budget and financial plan to alleviate anxiety about money. One of the things that ends up happening is we have a fear that we don't address, and it stays there and grows. Sometimes all we need to do is switch on the light and say, okay, let me face this fear. I am worried. Like my mom always says, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. If you have a genuine fear, look at it in the eyes and say, what is it that I'm actually scared of? If it's that I might lose my house, then what can I do to avoid that happening? Once you put a plan in place, then the fear tends to shrink a little bit. So then you're like, okay, cool. I need to make sure I'm having this much in the bank for safety. Make sure I'm having this much incoming from work and other, side hustles that I may have. Make sure that I'm having enough in my savings account. Make sure I'm having savings pots and spending pots so that I'm only spending what I need to be able to be spending, so that I'm always have enough for my emergency fund, my knowledge fund, my travel fund, whatever that might be. All of that kind of stuff is sorted, so I know that I can spend all that is in this card, and I can happily do that because it's not affecting the rest of my financial stability. Once you have these systems in place, it can help you alleviate the anxiety, that stress within the body. All right. And also I would say about is the next one is number 3 is seeking professional financial advice and support to address money related fears. What ultimately is talking about it. When we keep it inside, it can grow. What you'll find is within the mind, it's like soup. There's lots of different things that's going on, but there's no particular order. And when that's happening, it can make it really difficult for us to deal with that emotion. Emotions are often not one thing, it's a combination of many things. So, for example, if you're thinking about the financial fears, it might be not just about what I'm making, but it's also what I'm spending. It might be also what is happening with the global economy. It might also be who I'm supporting back home in my home country. It might also be, am I giving to charity? It might be all kinds of different things that are associated with not just who I am now, but who I used to be. What did I come from? What was my past experience? How am I compensating or overcompensating for that lack or abundance that I grew up with? And how is that relating to where I am now? How is that contributing to my fear? All that kind of thing, if you keep it inside, can ball up into an even greater monster. So sometimes it's about speaking to people around you, who are your friends and family who have knowledge in this area, who are the people who are just the listeners. Maybe you just need to say it out loud and see how it sounds. And then there's also the idea of getting professional help. Speak to your local bank. There's a lot of banks who provide some professional financial help, and some of them do it for free. You might have a financial advisor you can speak to once a month, and they can create a plan for you, and they can help you get out of debt. They can help you work out your spending habits. They can help you look through and audit your spending over the last few months and things. And they can say, okay, these are the things you need to do. Your credit rating is here. We need to get it up to here. All those things can happen, but it won't happen unless you start speaking about it. All right. And a lot of things to do with fear in general, as well as looking at it in terms of related to burnout, is when we address it, we can actually alleviate a lot of that pressure. And it can literally be like turning off the lid, opening the lid to a fizzy bottle to let air out. All of a sudden we feel this release. Okay, cool. Actually, I know what's happening. I'm going to check my finances every morning. I'm going to open my bank balance and just have a look and see what the numbers is. So I am aware, okay, yesterday I spent £20 on this. I spent £50 on this. Okay, I'm aware of it now. What can happen is, especially if you were for example, the big spenders or the shoppers I mentioned earlier, the ones who aren't necessarily paying attention to the finances. Part of that can be like, you don't know if you're going to hit red. You don't know if you're going to tap and it's going to say green or red. You don't know. And that not knowing can provide fear as well, that anxiety, that pressure up in your body. So number 1 is looking at practicing gratitude and mindfulness to shift the focus from lack to abundance. Number 2 is creating a realistic budget and financial plan to alleviate anxiety and about money. And number 3 is seeking professional financial advice and support to address money related issues, fears. Number 4 is prioritizing self-care and hobbies that bring joy and fulfillment outside of work. One of the things I heard, which I was like, this is such a dope concept, is, and I've seen it in a few places, but for me it was in a workshop, and they said, have yourself a spending goal as well as a saving goal, right? So for example, if you have Monzo or any of those kind of accounts, you can have pots. So you can get your money by percentage. You can put, money into these pots, and you can give yourself a spending goal. This is how much I want to spend at the end of the month. I need this to be empty, which means I need to buy all the things that I want to buy, all this kind of stuff, right? You might have a travel pot specifically for travel. So if it's travel is something that brings you joy and fulfillment outside of work, for example, and it's something that gives you life, and you like cultures, you like to feel like you're outside of the world, you like to sit on a beach, under palm trees, all that kind of stuff, and it helps with your wellness. Create space for that intentionally. Put money in it. It doesn't have to be like, a lot. Like, even for example, if you were to put 10 to 50 pound a month to fund into that, then at the end of the year you may have at least one trip that you can plan for yourself, or for your immediate family, right? It might not be necessarily international, halfway across the world. It might be even within your country. There might be a town that you've never been to, and there might be a little spa or resort that you can go to. All these things can help you build and release that stress, that tension. Because we have to prioritize our self-care. We have to do that. As a general rule of thumb, when you're looking at burnout recovery, looking at how you treat yourself is a really big indication of how much, or if at all, you're going to be able to reverse the impact of burnout, reverse that momentum. Number five, sorry, on things you can do to recover from burnout is challenging your limiting beliefs about money and success through therapy and coaching. So this is where I can come in. If this is something you're struggling with, you can get in touch. You can book a call. If you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, there's a QR code somewhere around there. If you're on Instagram, you can DM me, and we can talk about it, right? Just say, I'm struggling with this. I've got this fear of poverty, this fear of finances, and it is driving me towards burnout. How can you help? I do packages for, I do drop-in sessions, but I'm ending those really, because what I'm finding with burnout after working with a few people is that it's something that you can't really solve in one session. I can give you loads of tactics, but even if I was to do that, I would still need to catch up with you later on to see how you're implementing it. Because sometimes it's not what we know, it's if we're implementing what we know. And our job in terms of therapy and coaching is to help you do that. Therapy, we might be looking at the background and seeing what's holding you back in the first place. What are the frameworks and the mental, how are you thinking that is keeping these things as a present issue? And then coaching is helping you go, okay, now we've dealt with that. How are we going to put strategies in place for you to make sure that you can't fail in this goal, right? How can we make sure that you've got the right habits during your day? How can we make sure that you got your right accountability with your family and friends? How can we make sure you've got the right support system and knowledge and tools and systems around you, so that when you step out in a week, a month, a year, you will still be on this journey towards where we're planning to go, instead of finding yourself taking one step forward and two steps back each time. Okay. Number 6, the last and final one in terms of how to recover from fear of poverty or finances that can keep you away from burnout, is to volunteer or donate to help others in need and foster a sense of abundance and generosity. My mom actually caught me onto this. Help yourself by helping others. One of the things that can happen when it comes to finances and having a fear of finances is hoarding it, feeling like you can't let go, because if you let go of anything, it will disappear. After you've got that system in place where you've got your pots and stuff, and you've got your strategy, your finances, it's really important to give. Giving helps towards that cycle of abundance. It tells yourself psychologically that I have enough to be able to give, which allows you space to receive, right? Often there's this issue where we try and receive what we're not giving, and it can find ourselves as a block a lot of the time. So it's important to actually give, and give yourself. My mom has a giving budget every year, every month. She has a pocket of money that she's actively looking for places to give, right? And it's more than that 10%. It's so, for her, it's like, it's really important for her that she has that, so that she's able to say, okay, cool, this month I'm going to be giving to this person is in need, I'll give. And then for those of you who do give, you will know how it feels to be able to, first of all, to be in a position where you can give, helps with the gratitude, which was one of the point number one, right? Knowing that you're actually in a space where you have the capacity to give. And there's two ways you can do it. You can either say, even if you're trying to get through debt, I would often say debt is probably the first one I would try and get rid of. Get rid of the debt first, because often you're paying interest on your debt. So get rid of the borrowing money to get big returns, right? But generally, if it's bad debt and it's just like you've overdrawn, paying back to your bank, or you've got your, Amex over your loans and all that kind of stuff, pay that back first. And once you get to that stage, put like a percentage aside every month and make sure you're giving, 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 giving. Psychologically, it will tell you that you have enough, that you are in a state of abundance. It'll help with your gratitude, and be generous with it. One of the, I can't put the scientific term to it right now, but there's something that happens when you give. You realize you start to receive. And it's something that sounds very woo-woo. When I first came across it, it sounded very much like that. But the evidence is in the pudding. Like if you find yourself in a state where you're giving, you're constant, people see that. People respond to it. They realize this is a giving person. One of the things I've noted, like, for example, it actually feels good paying for your friend's meal, for example, or the meal of someone, or like the Starbucks of someone in front of you or behind you, or someone who, or even anonymously, right? Giving. And like direct debit is great, but if you can do it consciously and say, I'm actually giving this right now, it can have an even stronger effect, because direct debit is in the back of your mind. It's not even something you think about. But when you actually have to give consciously, it puts it into the forefront. It brings it into your consciousness, and you're aware, consciously aware in the moment that you're doing it. It has a completely different magnitude of effect. But when you do that, there's something that happens where you're open to receive a lot more. So just to respond again, today I'm talking about out of Napoleon Hill's 6 basic fears: fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, loss of grief, basically, old age, and death. Today we're looking at the fear of poverty and how that relates to burnout, and the 6 ways I said to recover from it and to help alleviate that fear of poverty, or finances, should I say, is number 1 is practicing gratitude and mindfulness to shift focus from lack to abundance. Number 2 is creating realistic budget and financial plan to alleviate anxiety about money. Number 3 is seeking professional financial advice, and support to address money related fears. Number 4 is prioritizing self-care and hobbies that bring joy and fulfillment outside of work. Number 5 is challenging limiting beliefs about money and success through therapy and coaching. Number 6 is volunteering or donating to help others in need and fostering a sense of abundance and generosity. I hope this has been helpful. If this is something you struggle with, get in touch with me. Let's see if I can help. And if it's something you've recovered from yourself, share it with us. What are the things that you've done as a strategy to help against your fear of finances? And how did it get into a state of abundance? I'd love to hear from you. Whatever you're up to today, I hope you're safe. And let's shake off this fear and get outside of burnout and stay clear of it. Yeah. I'll chat to you soon tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be the next one on the list, which is fear of criticism. That's going to be an interesting one, because I think a lot of us fear that. Yeah. And it's attached to a lot of different things as well. So I'll see you tomorrow, probably around 7 o'clock.